Welcome to Behind the Front Panel, where we take a look at what goes on behind the scenes of CP Museum. In the Front Panel series, we'll be showing the behind-the-scenes operations like unpacking, transporting, storage, and preparation of exhibit items. But in this episode, we introduce CP Museum. Here today, I have with me the founder of CP Museum, Corey.
Hello.
What caused you to start collecting?
I've always had a collection of sorts of the computers I owned back in the 70s and 80s.
Was there any particular event that got you into collecting specifically?
Well, the thing that spurred me to expand the collection beyond my own equipment was seeing an IMSI 8080 for sale. Back in high school, I had a friend who had an IMSI, and we spent a lot of time building boards for it and writing software for it, and I really loved the experience of the front panel, and I really just wanted to be able to click the switches again.
And how long ago was that you got the IMSI?
Well, I got the IMSI in 2006, so nearly a decade ago when I first started.
So how big is the collection now?
Well, in terms of systems, we're up over 200. Each of those systems has peripherals associated with it, things like disk drives and monitors, and of course they all have software associated with them. So altogether there are several thousand items in the exhibit, but again, in terms of individual systems represented, probably about a little over 200.
So what spurred you to open the public space?
Well, my intention had always been to fix up the machines and document them and do a website. As a matter of fact, all the way back in 2006, I registered the website cpmuseum.com, specifically with the intention of doing another website to take pictures and document and gather documentation and things like that. But some recent events, as well as the availability of some display space, spurred me to actually bring the stuff out and get it out of the dark.
Recent events?
Yeah, last November I joined a group called MARCH. That stands for Mid-Atlantic Retro Computing Hobbyists. They are a group that maintains a physical museum space in New Jersey, but in addition to that, they also have an online presence. They have a chat group on Yahoo message boards.
And that inspired you how?
They convinced me to attend the annual computer show, the Vintage Computer Festival East, which was last April, and I exhibited a Lisa 1, a fairly rare machine, an example with Twiggy floppies in it, and really enjoyed all the enthusiasm and interacting with the fellow hobbyists and all the sharing of knowledge. It was a lot of fun.
So is that what spurred you to move beyond the virtual presence and into physical space?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing that caused me to start collecting in the first place, the hands-on experience. There are quite a few websites that you can go to, including Wikipedia, where you can see pictures of computer systems and read about them. But as you and I both saw at Vintage Computer Festival in April, there's just no substitute for the hands-on experience. There's just something about seeing a person's face when they touch that machine for the first time in 20 years, and it brings back those memories.
So obviously there isn't enough space to display all 200 plus systems.
Sure, that's a pretty common problem for all museums. Most museums have a larger stock of items than they have space to display, and we're handling it the same way most museums do, by doing themed exhibits where we're going to put out a subset of what we have in the collection at any given time, with the idea of addressing a particular theme or a particular subject.
And you already have the first exhibit laid out.
It's called Refresh Your Memory, and it's the most crowded exhibit we'll ever put on display, with over 150 systems.
Refresh your memory.
Aside from the obvious pun, the goal is just what the title implies, to have enough systems on display that just about everyone who comes to visit the museum can see something that brings back a memory. And for those who don't have memories of early computers, we have another wing that's almost certain to appeal to them.
The video game sub-wing that I curate, the arcade.
Yes, your collection. So, what brought you into the collecting world, and why video games?
Well, that question is actually two separate questions. There's the why video games in general, and then what brought me into collecting. Well, I've always been into video games ever since growing up playing your old ColecoVision, and then the original Nintendo that you gave me when I was 6 or however old I was at the time. But I didn't really start collecting until sometime last year. I was poking around the internet, as I often do, and hitting the random button on Reddit. and I stumbled upon a subreddit called Game Collecting. And I got really interested into all these people's stories about what they're collecting, why they're collecting, and stuff like that. And that got me really interested into collecting itself. I had an advantage since I tend never to throw anything away. I had all of my original consoles from when I was growing up. And when you invited me to set up a wing for video games, we augmented my collection with parts of your collection.
Yes, my collection included quite a few earlier consoles that predate the Nintendo, things like Atari and Intellivision and Coleco, and probably quite a few you've never even heard of.
Like the Bally, which I quite enjoy because it's a blend between your collection and my collection, because you can program in BASIC on it, something that I hadn't really known was a thing.
Sure, that's part of the reason why my collection had video games in it in the first place. Obviously, I played Atari 2600 and enjoyed it. I had a Coleco, obviously, and you had it after I did. But the thing that appealed to me were things like the Compumate that allowed the Atari 2600 to run BASIC. And the fact that the Coleco included an Atom, which was a full-blown standalone computer with a cassette interface. So, how big is the collection since we've combined our mutual resources?
Well, at this point, we're at about 50 consoles, and of course, their associated peripherals, controllers, light guns, that kind of thing, and hundreds of video games spread across all of the consoles.
So, what do you want to get out of exhibiting?
Well, much like your setup, I want to have people sit down in front of these consoles so they can actually experience what it feels like to play them. But I'm more leaning towards having the younger generation who didn't grow up with these consoles to have a chance to experience them for the first time.
Yes, that certainly fits with the mission of CP Museum. And also along with that mission, we're releasing a new series of videos, starting with this one.
Yes, we currently have 3 series in the works. This series, Behind the Front Panel. We also have On the Workbench, where we take a look at repairing, restoring, rebuilding of all different PCs. And then we have the main series, Little Bits of Computer History, where we take a more educational look at each individual computer. So remember to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and as always, keep your CPU cool.